What are you going to do in the winter when your rates go up this much? Now, this still isn't as much as we're going to see when the state electrifies.
Sure. You don't need to give these high net worth, really profitable companies tax dollars. What you need to give them is a way to do this stuff in a fast, cost-effective way supported by reliable electricity.
So Colorado is I'm saying it's about ready to flip the sign to closed for business just based on their energy policy. I'm not saying we're there yet, and it can be corrected, but they're about to go there.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to PowerGab, your go-to show for all things going on in energy and environmental policy in Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined by my co-host, Amy Cooke. This week's episode, we're going to do a little bit of a twofer, but first we want to start off with some news from a utility that we don't typically talk too much about, but it is a major utility, and that's Atmos Energy. They're one of the major natural gas suppliers in the state. They serve about 120,000, 130,000, something like that, customers. Both in the northern part of the state and out west. And they just sent out a notice that you received, actually, Amy, that they are going to be jacking up their gas prices.
Yeah, they are. And you're not an Atmos company.
No.
So do you use natural gas?
Yeah, XL.
Okay, so you're an XL natural gas customer. So Atmos, which used to be Greeley Gas, believe it or not, and it was Atmos bought them and they became Atmos. But it was Greeley Gas when I first moved up to Weld County. Served obviously Weld County and Greeley and just the area. And it has become Atmos. And I received a notice in the mail with our last Atmos bill that rates are going up. And so I looked at them and just so you know, Atmos serves not just Colorado, but it claims to have 3 million, what they call distribution customers across 8 states. So Atmos is large, maybe not large here in Colorado, but it has a large footprint overall. And so it serves, to your point, in northern Colorado, there's southwestern Colorado and southeastern Colorado. So residential rates in northern Colorado, so for me, they are going up 25%. And the average projected they put the average monthly bill is $49.37, and that's to go up to $58.47 for a total of let's call it a 19 or 18% projected change, and then projected peak change. So we're a winter peak. Well, for natural gas, at least for our house, we're winter peaking. Mm-hmm. It's about a 22% increase. So, I mean, I got this, and you get that stuff in the mail. You get it. It comes in your envelope, in your bill, your remittance. Yes, I still get mine online, or I still get mine in the mail. You understand? I have a husband that wants mail, and he wants to put a stamp on an envelope and drop something in the mailbox. That is how we do it at our. Although I take that back. I've actually taken over much of this, and it is online. But I do get these things in the mail. So I got this notice, and I've written on it. You'll see notes, but I've got this notice, and all I could think of was, so a 25% increase in rates. Somehow they're lowering some other part of the bill so that the percentage of change is 18%, but during the peak, winter peaking, it's almost a 22% increase. Now that's for residential. For commercial, the increase in rates is 32%. And irrigation, which, ag, 33%. The percentage of change for the peak, for the winter peaking, 21, like I said, 21.6, let's call it 22. Let's call it, that's for residential, 30 for commercial, and for ag, or what they call irrigation, 27.35. Now, in southwestern Colorado, if you're in southwestern Colorado, the residential change, the increase is 17.43, and commercial is 23.35. And the percentage change in your bill, they say, will be about 12.28, and let's call it almost 19 for commercial. If you get to southeastern Colorado, you're looking at rates. I'll just do the rate change: 22% for residential, commercial's at 29%, and irrigation is at 30%. And then your percentage, projected change in your bill is supposed to be anywhere from 14% for residential to 21% for commercial, and irrigation or ag 26%. Here's the thing. So that's a lot. I mean, look, can we just say that? I mean, that's huge. And natural gas has been relatively inexpensive for a while. Now, I know that Atmos has a significant infrastructure system.
Yep.
But this, according to this is mostly for the cost of natural gas. I mean, they tell you that right on the sheet. We've been notified of this, and you can make comments if you go to the PUC if you received this. And I'm sure if you go to the Atmos website, you can see this. But the price of natural gas has been relatively low, and it's still not even with a rate increase, it's still not at historic highs that we saw like in the early 2000s when it was really high. But they have said that for 2025, the cost of natural gas will be going up. But I'm still looking at this going, this is huge. So I want to say to Danae Iskar, what about this? This is huge money. And so my husband John is retired, and I think we got the cost of living adjustment on. He's got Social Security, he's got a pension. One of them was like, you're going to get a 1% adjustment or 1.5%. I mean, this is not just a problem for working families. This is a problem for those on a fixed income. We're fortunate. I'm not gonna cry about the success. We've been successful. We'll be okay. But if you're on Social Security and maybe a modest pension, and you're on a fixed income, there is nothing that is covering this rate increase.
Yeah.
Nothing. So what are you going to do when in the winter, because winter peaking system, what are you going to do in the winter when your rates go up this much? Now, this still isn't as much as we're going to see when the state electrifies.
Sure.
So this is bad. But it's, and I wish I could say this. I know Vanessa came in here, we get somebody who we work with, came in and said, do you have good news for us today? Nope. No good news, sorry. Atmos Energy customers, your rates are going up. They're going up significantly. I don't know what exactly is in their rate case, but I'll try and dig through it at the PUC level and see what's in the docket. But they're going up significantly. And I wish I could say this is the only one, but when the state moves to this electrification, we're going to be wishing for these rates.
Yeah, no.
There will come a time when the state tries to get to their, carbon neutrality or net zero by 2040. We'll be wishing for rates this low.
Yeah. No, one thing before we move on to our other topic, I do want to touch on, because it brings up an opportunity to explain. I don't think a lot of people understand how their natural gas bill works with reflections in the gas market.
Yeah, good point.
So this is part of a quarterly thing that all gas utilities have to do at the PUC. Or they don't have to do it, but they come in quarterly and adjust the rate, the volumetric rate, based on what the spot market is for natural gas at the time. And to your point, it seems like natural gas, I saw in 2025, is projected to go up pretty substantially.
Yeah.
It's already gone up a little bit this year because of things like the hurricane disrupted a lot of production down in the Gulf. They're saying that exports are going to ramp up next year. So some of that's getting baked into the market price. And so what these utilities will do is, at a quarterly basis, they'll try to forecast what they think the market's going to look like over that next 3-month period, and bake that into their bill that they charge, the rate that they charge, and then the next quarter they'll revise either down or up based on what's going on with gas prices. So that's what's going on here. This is one of these things we saw in 2022 when they had to convene that special committee at the legislature. Was because of the war in Ukraine and what that did to the gas market. So this happens from time to time. But to your point, the overall point stands that a 22% increase.
It's
just
a lot.
Like that. I don't know about you, but my salary didn't go up 22% in the last quarter. So
no, it didn't. And and of course, they're recovering the cost of the fuel source. So that's often where you'll hear, oh, wind and solar are less expensive because they're free.
Right.
Problem is converting, even with this price increase, converting wind and solar to usable electricity that is available on demand is wildly expensive because it's not available on demand. So you still have to build the backup, which is usually a lot of times natural gas or giant batteries that are more expensive than natural gas. So, so that point, part of it is well taken. The other thing is at the state legislature, they also require utilities to figure in a social cost of carbon. And they also require it to figure in a social cost of methane, both of which I think the social cost of carbon right now is about $68, what they call a short ton. So it's a 68, I think that's what it is. I could be wrong on that. It has to do with the amount of emissions. And so it affects primarily coal. But they've done this for natural gas too, and they do it for methane, and it's $1,756 per short ton for natural gas, and that gets baked into your bill. So I think they said, I was reading legislation or an article about it, the social cost of carbon. They said, well, it's only about $50 to $60 a year for residential consumers and significantly higher for commercial and obviously industrial. Point is, you do all of these things and add to that the Fenberg rider, the renewable rider. You add to that the Clean Air, Clean Jobs Act, and the energy commodity adjustment. You go all of those riders. We're now up to almost a dozen of them. You start talking about real money, and that's why, while your rates you look, we're at 9 cents a kilowatt hour or 10 cents a kilowatt hour. When you add in all of these things, at least for my Excel bill, the last one I looked at, we were closer to 16 cents a kilowatt hour when you factor in everything. So the point is, they're going up, and we wanted to mention, because we've talked about Black Hills, we talk about Excel ad nauseum, we talked about United Power. So we talk about a number of different utilities, municipals to the Colorado Springs utilities. We talk about them all the time. One that had never come up was Atmos.
Right.
And so it gave us an opportunity to talk about what's happening with Atmos because of this projected rate increase that we're going to see. And by the way, I should say this, and I'm not giving stock or financial advice at all, but I will say this: Yahoo Finance seemed to have a positive outlook for Atmos. They seem to be doing okay.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
And one other thing to note before we move on to our next subject is, if this is happening with Atmos, you can probably expect it's coming to the other gas utilities as well, if it is a commodity market thing, because they're all competing to buy this gas off the spot market. So could be coming to a utility near you.
And we all know what that is.
Right.
So yeah, you're right.
The other subject we wanted to bring up today, because this is something we've covered a few times, and the Denver Post kind of made this topical for us this week with a couple of articles about data centers. And you seem to be seeing the anxiety over data centers really ramping up. This one article in particular, there's a planned data center project in Denver, sort of near the Globeville area. And there's a lot of consternation right now on the city council between the fact that there's a tax incentive on offer for this data center, but people are worried about the water usage necessary and, of course, the grid impacts, because we have a grid that is getting increasingly fragile, and we have lawmakers that don't want to add dispatchable capacity to that grid, and now they're worried about this big source of new load on the grid.
Yeah, and it was interesting, Jake. I do this so you all don't have to. We do this, whether it's listening to a PUC hearing. I actually spent about 3 hours listening to a hearing from an interim committee in Texas about data centers and crypto mining, and just the addition, that additional demand on their grid. They're obviously, it's Texas. They're a different animal. They're under the jurisdiction of ERCOT, but talking about the load growth and do we have the capacity to meet that? Does Texas have the capacity to meet that? Which is relevant to our conversation here today. So it isn't just Denver or Colorado. It's all over the country, but it's really in places. It's actually less here.
Yeah.
Way less here than it is in other states or other municipalities, because two things. Remember what we talked about a couple of weeks ago? What was the number one concern of the developer of the units down at Lincoln and First? Reliable power.
Yep.
So I kind of get where the city council is asking, like, wait a second, we're not really providing reliable power as it is. And so now you're going to add a data center onto it, which the data center it said maximum power needs is somewhere between 65 and 75 megawatts. Well, what does that mean? According to XL Energy, if it at full power, and the chances are it's not going to be at full power, but if it were at full power, you're talking about the ability to power 82,500 homes, and that's based on the average per kilowatt that a home uses over the course of a year. So 82,000 homes, and we can't power what we have right now, and you want to bring this data center online. The other thing is they want to give tax incentives to it. So they want to give money to a business that will be drawing a significant amount of available power away from the grid, which is already, to your point, you said, fragile. We had a developer saying it was one of his number one concerns was reliable power. We are not building baseload capacity. In fact, we're doing the opposite. We're actually shutting it down.
That's right.
Shutting it down. So there are a lot of reasons to be concerned about this data center. I mean, listen, you want to bring a data center here, be my guest, do it. But I'm telling you, you're probably not going to get the power that you need to actually operate and manage your data center.
Yeah, two things on that are worth commenting on. You said the power capacity of this data center is around 60 to 75 megawatts, that's a lot of power, no doubt. But it's importantly not one of these hyperscale data centers that are becoming more and more common with the rise of AI. Now you're talking about data centers in other states that have the power that are in the hundreds of megawatts. Some are even saying potentially gigawatt scale data centers. And the fact that this is causing so much consternation tells me Colorado is nowhere near ready to accommodate the data centers of the future. The other thing is you brought up the tax credits. And this is something that you've seen reflected in policymakers across the state. There's sort of two mindsets, and I think both are wrong. One mindset is we need to give these guys, what they need is tax credits. That will help them come to the grid. We'll give them all the tax credits, and that everything will be hunky-dory after they get their tax credit. And then the other attitude reflected in the Post article, and I've seen in policymakers elsewhere, is just sort of a degrowth, no data centers allowed here because it'll keep the dirty coal plants online longer, or it's bad for ratepayers, bad for the environment. And I think both are misguided, because we shouldn't be hostile to new load. New load is new opportunities for innovation. It supports the rest of the economy. These data centers aren't just a hobby horse of these people. This is actually supporting business. And two, you don't need to give these high net worth, really profitable companies tax dollars. What you need to give them is what we talked about with Glenn Lyons a few episodes back, is a way to do this stuff in a fast, cost-effective way supported by reliable electricity. So get the regulations out of the way, something like consumer regulated electricity or some other paradigm that will clear some red tape without giving taxpayer dollars to these folks and let the data centers proliferate that way. So I just wanted to make those 2 points on this.
That's actually, it's a great point about the data centers and the ones, this is a very low load data center. You're 100% correct.
Yeah.
Some of the ones I was listening to in Texas, you're talking 400, 500 megawatts, and to your point, all the way up to a gigawatt of power. That's massive.
Yep.
I mean, you would need Craig power to power something like that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And here's the other thing that they'll tell you, oh, the data center, we can just reduce demand. Well, to some extent, depending on what it is, some of the data centers, they're storing information that first responders need, or that hospitals need, that schools need. You can't just decide. It's not like the crypto mining where you can say, okay, we're going to shut it off. You can't just go, we're going to shut off the data centers. They actually need their power. Now you can reduce it, but you can't just, from what I understand, and I could be wrong on that, but from what I heard in that testimony that I heard in Texas when I listened to it, the data centers you can't just go in and shut it off. In fact, there was a little bit of a conversation between the crypto miners and the data centers saying, crypto's like, shut us off, and data's, you can't just shut us off. So that is a huge point. We're nowhere near ready to accommodate this. And by the way, that we're surrounded by states that are.
Right.
Wyoming, we talked about this beforehand, Wyoming, and I tell you what, this is a headline from Utah today. Remember I told you, get your extension cord, throw it over the line and plug into Utah? So this is in Utah, this is the Utah News Dispatch. Expect an energy-heavy session in 2025, focused more on people than emissions. So people first, still be concerned about emissions, but people first. Look, and then they say new plans are expected to take an abundance mindset, according to the Office of Energy Development. So they are actually looking at possibly doubling their capacity over the next decade. So think about that, doubling their capacity because they want growth, not because we're switching off baseload. And so therefore, just to power what we have now, we're going to have to double or triple our wind and solar capacity. They want to double reliable, affordable capacity to say we're open for business. Colorado is saying, essentially with its policy, the opposite. And this data center is a prime example of it. It's like Dick Lamb. Don't build E470 because people will show up and use it. Jared Polis, don't fix the roads. Don't build more roads. We're going to use less roads. We want less roads. It's that scarcity mindset. And then the other thing is, if you have to build out this power, who's going to pay for it? Are we going to socialize those costs across everybody? Or do we do what Glenn Lyons said, that you brought up, which is consumer regulated energy, or it's an energy innovation sandbox, the regulatory sandbox, or something where you get out of the way and let these large users build out their own projects to power themselves. And then, if there's excess, they can sell it back to the grid. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things you can do. But the point is, we're going to have to do something very different than what we're doing now.
I think that's right. And it's becoming increasingly fascinating to me, the Utah, Colorado sort of case study difference. It's abundance versus scarcity mindset, which I think is
I
fascinating.
saw a paper in there somewhere.
It really does seem like it could be.
A case study, Colorado, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah. We are not positioning ourselves well for growth. Yeah.
And one last thing before we wrap up here, just to your point about data centers not being willing or able to just shut off on a whim whenever the power is scarce. I think what really puts that a fine point on that is the fact that all these companies elsewhere, not in Colorado, are ponying up massive cash for next generation nuclear plants because they need things that are 24/7 reliable that they can count on, and they're really putting their money where their mouth is. So that tells me there's no economic case for them to just at a moment's notice say, oh, the wind's not blowing, we have to shut down for the day. I think they really are counting on 24/7 operations.
And think about that. Now, I don't know if those other states are giving them, sales tax breaks or what was the one on the Priola bill? Sales tax breaks for construction materials.
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it's like silly. It's silly. That's what they're looking for, is a place where they can get abundant, reliable power, because that's their number one input. Number one input is energy. So where can they do that? And if the electricity isn't, or the power isn't abundant or isn't reliable, then where can we go and build our own?
Right.
And they're willing to put, into your point, millions. I don't know, some of the reopening 3 Mile Island, that won't be cheap.
No. Yeah.
So they're willing to put their money where their mouth is. But again, Colorado is not keeping up on the policy side. There's nothing there that says we're open for business on this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Do you want to leave our listeners with any takeaways from either of the topics that we brought up today?
Yeah. One, rates are going up for natural gas. It just is. But it will pale in comparison to what we will be paying by 2040 should we continue on the same trajectory. That's number one. Number two is Colorado, with these data centers and these high intensity or high power usage, high tech companies. Colorado is I'm not going to say they have closed for business, at the state line, but they are. It's just open a little bit. There's not a lot of incentive for these incentives. When I say incentives, I'm not talking about tax incentives. I'm talking about the right policy to create an environment that would make Colorado look, attractive to these data centers that are using, AI or something else, or to crypto miners or anything else, or any of those high usage, high load users. And really part of that is, that's the future. So Colorado is I'm saying it's about ready to flip the sign to closed for business, just based on their energy policy. I'm not saying we're there yet, and it can be corrected, but they're about to go there. Think of the Dick Lamb, don't build it so they come, or Jimmy Carter, the scarcity mindset, put on a sweater, turn down your thermostat in the winter, that kind of thing. And then three, of course, get a generator. Get a generator so that maybe that hopefully will offset some of the rate increases that we're about to see, and the unreliable power.
Great advice as always. That does it for us on another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw here, head on over to iitv.org for our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And if you want to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests, you can do that at info@powergab.org. We'd love to hear from you guys. Until next week, we'll see you.